Welcome to Causes Getting Attention, a digital marketing podcast for nonprofits. I'm your host, Jason Birch, and here's a little taste of what you're about to listen to. Enjoy.
I tell people it's a marathon game. It's something you have to do consistently. Being a social CEO means you have to get involved and you have to slowly get in there. For people that jump into social and want immediate results, they're not going to find them.
Ian, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Really excited to dive into some of the work that you're doing for your organization.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm looking forward to it.
So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you started getting involved with working for nonprofits.
I think I had, like many people do in college, that experience where you're kind of discovering what it is you want to do and the direction you want to go professionally. And I had an opportunity to have an internship at a local nonprofit, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great mentor. I had an opportunity to do a lot of youth development work. I had an opportunity to get out in the community and do a lot of outreach. And I think that just kind of launched my career in doing what it is I really wanted to do later on in life. And I had those opportunities with a couple of great organizations. Boys and Girls Club of America. I was an operator, manager, executive director for Boys and Girls Club all over the country. And that was an amazing experience. And I had an opportunity as well with some education organizations, higher education foundation, which was just an amazing experience. And so I had an opportunity to kind of merge both worlds, the nonprofit world and the education world.
So how do you see your role as an executive director for the Grace Point Foundation? What is your sole objective?
So, my sole objective for the foundation really is to bring awareness to what the organization of what Grace Point is. And Grace Point is a very large, the largest behavioral health organization in all of West Florida. We have 700 employees. We service and help and support in some way between 22 and 25,000 individuals each year through some aspect of our programs and services. So when you talk about mental health, when you talk about behavioral health, you just want to make it relatable to people in the community so they understand the importance of it and the impact of your work. And that's really the objective of what we're trying to do at the foundation.
Yeah, and funny enough, I think today is World Mental Health Awareness Day. I think that's correct.
Health Awareness Day, it is.
I think I saw it on Twitter. So it's a very topical, very ingrained in our culture to try and figure out exactly how can we help people who are struggling. And there's also a stigma attached to it as well. So there's some challenges in terms of the communication to bring that to light. Do you find that as a challenge in your own right, trying to get that awareness across to a broader audience?
We do, and you said it best. There is a stigma associated with mental illness, and there's a fear there also. People really look at people who suffer, and I guess you can relate to understand that. How are you going to react if you lose a job, if you lose a loved one, if something traumatic happens to you? And that's what a lot of the folks that are experiencing a lot of the things that we talk about today, depression, anxiety, those kind of things, have experienced. And so we need to make it to where it's easy to talk about, it's safe to talk about. So we share a lot of stories. And we've found that in sharing stories instead of just statistics, you open up the lines for communication to where it's a lot more safe to talk about and you feel comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we connected on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. On Twitter, I think we've been following each other for a few months. When did you start to get involved in social media? I mean, I see your posts, I don't know, maybe 3-4 times a day through my feed, and you're just a brand ambassador for the organization that you served. How did that get started?
That started like a lot of people. I fought it for a long time. I was the guy that fought texting for a long time, Jason. So it was just one of those things where I finally said, I'm noticing something here. I'm noticing an evolution in where people want to go to communicate. I'm noticing that more people would rather text than actually pick up a phone call. I started noticing that people preferred the quickness and efficiency of social. And I think, and it took me some time to get to that place, but I think I started realizing that form of communication was giving back to people something they valued a lot, which was time. So it was probably around 2010, right before the birth of my son. And then obviously I wanted to be the really cool husband that stayed up and did all the late night feedings. So I stood up and I would, feeding my son early in the morning or late at night. And I just started learning and getting on Twitter and getting on Facebook more and understand and looking through LinkedIn and watching the evolution of that platform and just really kind of being a practitioner. You can only learn by getting in there and doing it. You can't just read about it and make a decision. So I wanted to be a practitioner at it.
Yeah, I recall a class that I had years ago. I think it was an accounting class, and the professor was talking to us about how he was studying for the CPA. And this is on topic, I swear. And he was talking about, how difficult the exam is and how time consuming it is and how he didn't feel like he had enough time to study. So what he did was he had these note cards where he would just read off the exam questions and he would take them with him everywhere he went. And, whether it was 5 minutes standing in line, he would pull out the note cards and start reading, or maybe he was at a doctor's office or something and pull out note cards and start reading. And my whole point with this is that, there's enough time in the day to do this. I mean, all it takes is to whip out your phone and you're on Twitter. You can start posting, you can start scheduling posts. I mean, what is your impression in terms of the amount of time it takes to actually be involved at the level that you are?
You said it right there. There's time in the day to do it. I think you just have to understand what's important to you that you want to do to either educate yourself, advance your career, become a personal brand, become a brand ambassador. And you have to make those decisions. For me, I made the decision I'm going to watch TV and I wasn't going to watch sport programs. I wasn't going to watch games. I wasn't going to, get into what favorite episodes. There's a whole time there between 2010 and 2000, probably 6 or 7, where I didn't know what some of these shows were and what people were watching. I just said, look, I'm going to take the opportunity to do this. And it just replaced that time for me. It wasn't like I had to add more hours in the day. We can't do that. You just have to make that switch of what's valuable to you to get to where you want to be.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to a recent project that you worked on. I believe it was the Stronger Than Stigma event that was held in June. Can you explain what that event was and what steps you took to lead up to it?
Stronger Than Stigma was a first-year event for us. It was a little bit of an experiment held in June, like you said. And the goal was to bring together, really for the first time in our agency's history, a diverse group of people, whether it's generational, cultural, socioeconomic, who all connected with the single issue of mental health. There was a little bit of fear before that maybe our region of the state of Florida, Tampa area, wasn't ready for that. And I think the unique thing was that we were able to look at a lot of different ways we could promote it, to socialize it first, and lay the groundwork for the success of the event. And then leading up to it, just tell those stories and get people excited about it to where when you actually got to the event day itself, it was a success. And then we had to make sure we use communication tools for what happened afterwards, which is just a ton of momentum for the organization to get involved and get plugged in some way. And so that took a lot of tactical things, both socially and digitally, to make happen.
And this wasn't something that you just, a week before the event sent out an email blast to your list. There's actually a lot of commitment that went into creating this campaign. Can you speak a little bit more to the specific strategies and tactics that you alluded to?
Sure. When you have to look at a new event, a lot of traditional nonprofit special event planning and logistics usually takes 4 to 5 months. But I think when you look at trying something new like this in an area that's still a little bit hard to talk about, like we've explained, you have to start a lot further down the road. And we made sure that if we're going to be an agency that talks about issues that are tough to talk about, we have to find a way to socialize that and make it comfortable. So the first thing we did about 10, 11 months before the event was have a photo shoot with our board members and have an opportunity for them to express on those images just quotes about why they're connected to the mission, why they support what we do, why mental health is so important. And then we pushed those out to the public slowly at first, and then we started to do it at scale on each of our digital and social platforms. And that got people talking. And I think that's what we wanted to do, is to really get people talking and see who's involved and and be comfortable with who's involved. So by the time we led up to the event, it was one that was a very natural, easy transition for a lot of people to come into and have a lot of fun at, and for it to be a success.
Yeah, I think it, excuse me, I think it goes back to what we had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, where being a social CEO or having high level members within the organizations being active, what were some of the results that you saw as you were inviting these board members to take part in more of the social media experiment when promoting this event?
Well, I think, being a social CEO means you have to get involved and work at it, and work at it to where, it's hard at first and it's maybe uncomfortable, but then it becomes seamless and comfortable throughout your work day and your work week. And for a lot of people, especially when you talk about a board, you're talking about a wide range of comfortability and technology use and social use, and who feels comfortable on what platform. I don't think we have one board member that feels comfortable on all platforms, or one that feels comfortable on, doing a photo shoot versus maybe doing a live video. But we do have a lot of people that had comfort somewhere. And so we wanted to just kind of go all in on where that comfort level was, and then encourage them to share. So if you're a big fan of LinkedIn and you enjoy that platform, and that's where you feel you're social and you're comfortably on social media, we had you push it out there and bring awareness to what we do. Some people were more Facebook people, and some people were more micro content, like on Twitter, and just wanted to share a link and say support, and then add their quote image. And so we just found where everyone was comfortable, and that's spending some time with folks to figure out where that is and encourage them to do it, and then have them report back to the group what that success was, because that helped encourage and spur others on to get more involved.
Yeah, it's funny because it only ever really takes one fan to promote change, and get the engagement that you're looking for. I was watching a video earlier today, actually, and they were talking about how people beat themselves down when they've only got 70 views on a video, or they only have one or two comments or likes on a post or something. And in the video, the person that was giving this presentation, I believe is what it was, he was saying, no, you should actually celebrate those wins. I mean, one person engaging with you is one more person than you had the day before, and that just kind of becomes a compounding effect.
It does. And I think sometimes when we explore something new like social and digital, we get caught up in the numbers, and we have to understand, especially the nonprofit sector needs to understand, it's not about width, it's about depth. And you can have 100 true fans, true people to support your mission, and they're going to engage and communicate and share, and that's going to be more impactful to your organization. Whether if you just had 1,000 people that were outliers and never really engaged with your content, or for that matter, want to share it with the world. So, we get caught up in these metrics. People that are just diving into social now don't understand how algorithms have changed a lot over the last 5 to 8 years. And so organic reach has become a little bit difficult. So you have to learn tactical things to put yourself in front of people, to make yourself searchable, to make yourself, for lack of a better word, findable and social. And I think we've seen how just the evolution of platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, what tactics you have to start doing to make that possible.
Yeah, I think you raise a lot of great points there. First and foremost, I see this shift in social where If you're not getting the organic reach, you might as well just pay for ads so that you can get that broad awareness. That's one route you can take. But I've also seen organizations, not just nonprofits, for-profits alike, start to look at the internet, the broad sweep of people that exist on the internet, and they're starting to make these micro audiences. And then they're developing content to speak to those particular segments, and usually it relates back to their own organization. How is the Grace Point Foundation segmenting out their audience, and how are you speaking to their specific needs?
Segmentation is so important, and we started learning the importance of segmentation in fundraising and making sure that if you, Jason, like to come to events, we need to put you on a separate list or a separate email blast or newsletter that just talks about the events that are coming up and some of the social and networking things that are happening in the agency. And then you kind of move from there. If you have an endowment, you want to make sure you update those folks who support the endowment like we do, and let them know what's going on and how we're cultivating that through our events and some of the neat and exciting things that are happening with it. So you take segmentation, which has been so valuable in your fundraising strategy, and you start doing the same thing in your social and digital strategy. So we wanted to make sure that each platform, and we're very active on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we used each platform, and we were going to make sure that we stayed true to the context of the platform and didn't just cut and paste the same content, the same graphics, the same photos in each of those platforms, because we know, especially over the last couple of years, that that's just not what people want to see, and you're going to lose your audience. It's not an effective strategy. It's an antiquated strategy, and you really have to understand that content might be king, but context is definitely queen in this chess game that you're trying to play on social.
So up to this point, we've talked about, and with relation to the Stronger Than Stigma event, we've talked about sharing stories, getting shareholder or board member involvement, and then this idea of segmenting out your audience. Taking all of these components and everything that we've talked about so far, what were some of the outcomes that you realized as a result of these actions that you took to promote the event?
I think for us, as soon as we started getting a little more in depth with segmenting, as soon as we started to really have a true focus on being aware of context on each platform and what not to do, we started seeing a lot more engagement. I think we just started, when we just started on Instagram, we just wanted to get content out there. So when people searched us or found us, they saw that we just didn't start the day before. So we were a little you're a little heavy on, well, let's build it up a little bit. Let's try to get a lot of stuff out there. So when people fall upon us in some way, whether it's searching a hashtag or whether it's somebody that we reached out to that we know and they see that we're following them and they follow us back, we wanted to make sure that whatever we put on our platform in some way was the goal was to provide value, whether that's to provide value to somebody searching just to want to learn more, about mental health, whether that's just someone wanting to learn more about our services. So those kinds of things. And so when I say provide value, I think we have to really take a step back and make sure that's provide value to whoever the end user is and not just to the nonprofit. I think we get kind of maybe stuck in a pattern of just pushing information out that we want to get out, whether it's about an event, a program, a campaign, and we need to start looking at what's valuable to the end consumer. And so those were kind of the early tactics that we did to launch. And then we became more specific to the platform and to the audience on that platform as we went on.
It's interesting because when you think about content, or at least maybe 2 to 3 years ago, the narrative was put it out as frequently and as consistently as possible. And I always thought that was kind of a weird thing. And you'll see, you'll go to a website and they'll say, 1,500 other people have joined this email list to get weekly fresh content. I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to get an email from you every week. I want to get information that's relevant. And I don't care when that time period is, as long as the information is good and it's relevant to my needs. How are you guys juggling that approach in terms of your overall content strategy?
I think one of the things that we did was really address with our board, what kind of frequency are you looking for? I mean, these are the folks that are the most engaged. So you got to look at what they say and probably take a step back from that and say, okay, if this is what you want, who came to an event or just getting associated with what we do, they're probably going to want a little bit less. Yeah, because that whole philosophy of frequency and consistent frequency, and then looking at the metrics for that, to start seeing a lot of people unsubscribing from you because you're overloading them. And you want, and again, it all goes back to, are you providing value? And if you're just pushing messages out every week or every 2 weeks or 2 or 3 times a week, like some people do, then I think it's about volume, and you're really just out there trying to smother people in your content, and you're going to hope that a majority of them don't unsubscribe from it or block it. So we had to be very, cognizant of frequency. We had to be very cognizant of how much we sent. Is it something you can click on and read within the first 15 to 20 seconds, and not be too much? Because again, we're trying to make sure that we don't take too much of people's time, because if it takes too much of their time, sooner or later, they're going to make a decision what's valuable to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also reading your audience too. What are they most receptive to? Do they like reading a long form blog post? Do they like consuming a 5 to 6 minute video? Are they more receptive to an audio format? Interestingly enough, I was reading, I subscribe to the Seth Godin blog. He does a weekly, blog every day. He's consistent with it, but it's always really good information. And he was talking about how podcasting is becoming the new blog. Like everyone is doing it, and it just kind of makes sense. I mean, you can have these in-depth conversations, and you can talk about these nuances that are revolving around all these different topics. But there's also direct feedback. When I talk to you, you're going to give me a response now. I don't have to wait to refresh my page for a comment or something, or a direct message. I don't have to wait. There's no lapse in that. So I think that there's an interesting shift in how we consume content, but it's also staying true to how people actually want to consume it. And that's just knowing your audience at that point.
Percent. And I believe that, we all have smartphones today, and I look at the cell phone or the smartphone really as the remote control of our life. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'd rather lose my wallet than lose my phone because of how much information is in my phone.
Yeah.
But if everyone is walking around with this device, and it's now become the utility of our life, it's our alarm clock, it's our flashlight, it's where we game, it's where a lot of us watch and stream video or watch movies. It's not just a phone anymore. I mean, even call it a cell phone almost doesn't make any sense. But if you have this device, and if you know that 3 or 4 social platforms are how people like to communicate, and 60% of the people that have this device are on those platforms every single day, then you have to go play in the space that they're in if you want to be successful and raise awareness for whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I mean, how long did it take for you to get traction online?
Wow. This is a great question. It takes a while. If you're talking about how long it takes to get traction, very different. I think online's kind of a broader sense. But I tell people it's a marathon game. It's something you have to do consistently to get good at. It's like health. I could do 5 push-ups right now. That's not going to do anything for me. Or I could do them slowly over time and then see a difference. So you have to slowly get in there. For people that jump into social and want immediate results, they're not going to find them. And a lot of people contact me and said, I don't know, Ian, social's not working for me. I posted every day on Twitter about our event and nobody showed up from that link. We got no ticket sales. And you'll go and you'll review what they did. And it was the same thing every day for 6 months. Same link, same content, same photo. And it's kind of humorous that way. And so I go, you're being disrespectful to the people on that platform with the way you're communicating. And people on social see that a mile away, and they'll stop reading you. They'll follow you, they'll block you, whatever it is, because you're taking up their time because you're not putting effort in that communication. So that's kind of the way I look at getting traction. I don't get frustrated when my numbers don't change after a few weeks or a few months, because I see the numbers go up and down. So I see maybe some of the content provided value to somebody and maybe it didn't provide value to others. And so you keep experimenting with what it is you put out to see what gets the most engagement. And then you do that for a while. And then you'll see that maybe your audience has become either desensitized to that or have seen too much of it. You prototype a little bit more and you find out what gets engagement. That's how you get traction. And that's all I did. It took a couple of years of being a practitioner and figuring out how to get noticed and how to become involved in conversations to start seeing what value I could add. And then people started picking up and following me after that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's been my experience as well since launching this website in 2016. It's been a very slow climb, but it's funny because, again, going back to one view matters because you don't know who that person knows, and then they share, and then it's a multiplying effect. 10 to 20 people sharing your content could reach thousands of people potentially, especially in their own networks of people and their groups. And if you're going back to the idea of segmenting your audience to a very specific niche, maybe they're sharing that information with other like-minded professionals who would then take an action down the road. And so, like you said, it is a very marathon type approach. But again, like we all want instant gratification when we go online. I mean, that's just kind of the assumption. So how do you juggle those investments, whether it's speaking to another executive director that wants to get involved on social, or maybe within your own organization? How do you explain or persuade that the value and investments into marketing are as important as other functions of the organization?
It's just taking the time and getting out there and being social and again providing value. And I think when people start to research you, look up your organization, look up who the leadership is. Let's just take a fundraising example. We kind of know from research that 70 to 80% of people, before they write a check to your organization, they're going to look you up. You're looking at your website, you're looking at your social media. They're going to see how you communicate to your audience, to your donors, because they want to feel comfortable about who they're giving money to. And if you're in that space and they see that you're communicating, they see that you're showing recognition, expressing gratitude, and engaging with your audience, they're going to feel comfortable with who you are. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to engage you right away. They're looking to see who it is you are. If social media has done anything, it's really exposed those who they care about, how they interact, and having an opportunity just to be in that space and for people to see that you're somebody who's authentic and genuine and really caring about what you do makes a huge difference in their decision whether or not they're going to give or support your organization or even share information that they find valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a trust factor. I mean, they want to see someone that's established, especially if they're going to give any amount of money. The whole online space, I think, inherently has this fear of unknown. Is this organization really who they say they are? And I think some of that has to do with how easy it is to spin up a website these days and how cost effective it is to do it. So, but it's also a thought leadership aspect as well, where you're putting yourself out there as the number one aficionado in your topic or subject, and you're doing deep dive conversations on specific topics within that industry that you can speak to and lend your expertise. Whereas before it might have been confined to a boardroom, now you're actually able to create these ideas and transfer them over into an online space.
There's just a lot of value, and I 100% agree with what you said. And when I talk to CEOs, whether they're nonprofit CEOs or small business owners or whoever it is, about the benefits of social and their fear of jumping in, I think people researching how you respond and act and interact on social and digital has really replaced that tab we all used to have on our websites and still do, where it talks about our vision, mission, and values of the organization. And I think it's one thing to say something in nice font and bolded on your website. It's another thing to go out and display that each and every day, each and every week, with your audience, with your customers, with your donors, and how you actually are. And I think that replaces what that used to be, because people can see it each and every day. You're living by example. You're showing what your values are when you interact with somebody who's upset with your organization, or you're expressing gratitude to an event or to staff or whoever it is. You're really showing who you are on social, and that is the authenticity that people want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice what you preach, going back to being a practitioner and getting involved in all these different platforms. So, looking forward, how are you planning to reach Grace Point's Foundation's digital goals? What are some of the things that you want to start experimenting with, dabbling with, and what's your take on the future of the organization?
Well, we're really excited, actually. The momentum and the success we've had laying the foundation. And laying the foundation was not just getting people to jump in, educating first, talking about the value of it, talking about why we're going to do it this way, and then slowly start stepping into the pool and realize that we can have little successes along the way, share what those are. So that's the instant gratification that I want people to see, because some people like to wait just a second to see how somebody else's success was or what their experience was. And then that convinces everyone else to take that next step too. So knowing that we've taken that first step, knowing that we built a foundation, we got a lot of goals set for us this year and future. And a lot of those things have to do with really jumping in to getting more into video, but long form and short form video, PSA type things to get people's attention concerning what our mission is and the impact of our organization, but even longer form video to really share with people why people get involved with our organization, asking questions like, why is it that you give, or what was it, what happened, or what convinced you, what was that moment in time that said, you know what, this organization is something I want to be a part of, because those stories are extremely powerful to new donors and your general audience, and keeping them engaged and informed with bringing in new people and the excitement around that. I think the other thing we're looking to do as we start moving into the video is really understand that certain things are becoming more and more popular, and we've seen how voice has really grown over the last couple of years in terms of the voice equipment community out there with Google Home and Alexa and all of these things. And voice search is on the rise, and they're talking about 30 to 40% of all searches are going to be on voice by 2020. So while you see things emerging and gaining traction, you want to jump in now and really become a practitioner now, because when it's at scale, you'll be there and you'll be relevant.
One of the common themes that I see, particularly with video, but also content in general, is focusing on the process, really talking about the behind the scenes aspect of your organization. Do you see yourself creating content around that aspect as well? And if so, how important do you think it is?
Incredibly important. I think people want to see authentic video. It's kind of why one of the most searched and viewed sections on Netflix is the documentary section, surprisingly to a lot of people, because people like that behind the scenes footage because it's the most genuine. I think if you only produce video that's the way you want to do it and it only has what you want to get out in mind, then I don't think it comes off as authentic as you wish it did. So I'm much more about sharing the moment. So you can do a Facebook Live of your event, but that's not going to be as interesting to somebody as maybe the Facebook Live of your event, why you're setting up, why people are running around moving, because that's attention grabbing and that's genuine, and people like to see the behind the scenes stuff. So it becomes a debate on whether or not you should document or create. And I think when you create video, sometimes you're limiting yourself to the attention you're going to get for it. And I think when you document it, people find that raw authenticity, something that grabs their attention, draws them in, and makes them want to be a part of what it is you're doing.
Document, be authentic, provide value. I think if you can do those three things on all three mediums, written, voice, and audio, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Said it better myself. You just shortened the entire podcast in one line. I appreciate you doing. They'll put that in the show notes. No one's going to listen.
I'll have to put that at the beginning of the episode. So moving forward from your organization, and speaking more broadly, what is the single biggest challenge that nonprofit marketers face when trying to tackle digital?
I think, well, I'd say there's a couple of problems, but I think one of the things that I see over and over again is you always have somebody in the organization that wants to try things, wants to do it. And then I think there's some pushback either from leadership, administrative leadership, whether it's the CEO or the board, or maybe some pushback from the programmatic staff that they don't feel comfortable jumping in to social and digital. And so I think it's trying to find out, who can you get? What influencer within the organization? What influencer in the leadership? Who on the programmatic staff that might be willing to step up and show people that it can be done, and to show people that you can have some fun and some success with it. So there's a few things that marketers have to deal with, and I think sometimes internally that's fear. I think maybe externally showing that what they're doing is worth the time of the organization, and not getting too caught up in the analytics, especially what I would call the vanity metrics, just the number of views or clicks or likes, but understanding that there's a long tail ROI to this. And that is, there's a lot of people searching your organization or looking you up just to see the kind of person and organization you are. Again, it's a new way of expressing what your mission and values are and how you interact with people. And it's good to have that there, because if it's not there, there's a good chance a lot of people are going to move on. So I think a lot of marketers, when they're looking to jump in, face a couple of challenges, and you just have to slowly work your way to address those by finding some people willing enough to take that first step with you.
I agree. And one of the interesting things about digital as a platform, speaking broadly again, is that you are engaging with people when they want to be engaged with. You're not forcing them to read your content through necessarily an email blast, but if you're posting on social media all day and they're flipping through their feed and they just happen to see, I see your posts on LinkedIn all the time, and I'll like and I'll comment here and there. But I feel like it's giving them the choice to engage with you on their own terms. And I think that that's a huge difference, as opposed to doing something that's more direct appeal. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that the investment and the ROI side of things, like you were saying, needs to be looked at as more of a long-term project and process, as opposed to, if we start posting today, when are we going to start making money? Is it going to be 30 days, 60 days? Well, no, realistically, it's probably going to take 12 to 18 months if you're doing it very, very well.
Right. And you said it. You said it. Time is quickly become the number one emerging pillar of value for more people right now. People are doing things on their time. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if you wanted to watch a TV show, you had to be in front of the TV at that time or you missed out. Today, you ask any crowd of people who watches television on their time, whether that's Netflix or Hulu or HBO Go or whatever, a majority of the people are going to say they watch it on their time. So we've shifted in how we even deploy communication and information, because we now understand the value time has to individuals and families. And I would even go as far to say, outside of the health and well-being of your family and inner circle, and maybe even more than money, time has become the number one asset that people care about.
Yeah, I mean, I think partially it has to do with the amount of information that is just being injected into the internet on a daily basis. I mean, news cycles change within 24 hours, even less than that. And that's something that's more or less a phenomena in the last 20 years, as we've seen news try to adapt to the changes of digital platforms and the necessity of getting instant information. I mean, when you think about it, 30 years ago, you had to have a lot of money to finance these trips around the world, to get well-trained staff out there, all the equipment that's required to do an interview or to cover a report. Now you get someone boots on the ground with their phone and they're just taking a video live as it's happening. So how do you even compete in that sense? But it is becoming a lot more. People are becoming a lot more stringent with how they use their time as a result. And I think this goes back to the consistency conversation that we had, where I don't really want to get an email from you every week about whatever it is that you posted. I want you to give me something that's really of really high quality value that I can then take action on.
And that's all about value. You said it. It's got to be high quality. It's got to be something that's relevant. If time really is so important to people, then it's really become the thing that we have to go after. I tell people all the time, I'm not after people's money. I'm a professional fundraiser, and that throws a lot of people off. I'm after people's time, because I know whatever they invest time in, because that has more value to them, they'll eventually invest money in. So I need to spend a lot of time myself, and what I do every day is winning people's attention. Their time unless I get their attention. And then the next question always is, well, how do you get their attention? And it goes back to what we've been talking about. You provide value. I don't think there's anybody in your life, Jason, anybody listening, anybody in my life that I didn't give my time to that didn't provide me value in some way, whether that's friendship, whether that's just a way to enjoy myself and have fun, whether it's entertainment. You have to go back to or what you would call, like, what are the things that you're practicing in your personal life? What are some of these things that you're doing? And how can you say, okay, if this is how I treat things in my personal life, then why can't I start having some of these thought process and how I should go about treating things in my professional life? And you might not like where technology is going. You might not like where communication is going, but I don't base decisions that I need to put together for the betterment of my organization based on how I feel about something personally. I have to look at it more objectively than that.
Yeah, and I think just through your actions alone, you've shown that being human online is what people want to see. Going back again to being genuine, showing the process, and then through that your message will come across. So pretend that I am a executive director of a nonprofit. I've never touched any digital channels, no social. I have a website up, but I'm interested in getting more involved. What would you tell me? Where should I invest my resources, and how should I start?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm assuming you've been in a coma for 15 years in this scenario, right? That's a tough one, but it's happening and it's real. Usually I like asking people, how do you like your information first? Because if you're going to start something, if you're really truly starting from ground zero, let's talk about you first. Let's get self-aware with how you like getting information. Is it in short form? Is it in long form? Is it in audio? Is it in video? And let's put that down on paper and figure out where it is. If we're going to jump in, let's jump in with something that you're comfortable with. And you put that on paper. And then I think you take the opportunity to look at and ask your audience. We don't survey our audiences enough. We don't ask them for information enough. We don't let them help dictate how they receive information enough. So one of the tricks that I started doing to help with segmentation and communication is when you have a donor card or when you have an opportunity to fill anything out at an event, just add in a couple more questions. How do you like to receive your information? Is it text? Is it email? Is it social? Do you like to be tagged on things? Do you like to have it be recognized with photos on things? Find out what your audience likes, and you'll normally find that you have a lot of similarities. But when it comes down to just starting out, I think you have to say, okay, this is what I like, and what I feel about communication might have a little bias. That's why I have people do this exercise. But when I hear from my audience, I find it's a little different. So if you're just going to start out, don't just start out with what you feel comfortable with. I think you need to start out with what your audience feels comfortable with. And I think when you do that exercise of you in one column and them in another column, you're going to learn something about communication. You're going to learn something about how it's evolved and what people are moving towards than maybe you might not have before. And that's why you haven't started before. It takes a while to figure out what your biases are. They don't call it unconscious bias for a reason. You don't think about it. And I think when you do this type of activity, you're really finding out what biases you have against communication and technology. And you're learning at the same time from your audience group and from your donor group that, okay, I need to do something that provides value to them and not just me. So I'm going to go do that. So jump in. If you're going to jump in at all, jump in where you know your audience is and just go on that journey with them. They're going to see how raw you are and how genuine you are. They're not going to look for how buttoned and sharp your posts are or your links are and your photos and stuff. They're going to understand that you're jumping in. They're going to appreciate the fact that you're trying to meet them in their space.
Well, it's also primary research. It's market research, primary market research, which is really interesting because we put so much stock into secondary research, where you'll see a report that was generated that X% of donors prefer to pay online via a credit card or a debit card. Well, that's great information, and there is a little bit of actionable takeaways there. But what if you pose that same question to your own audience? Or better yet, what if you sent out an email to your audience asking, what do you want us to write about? What information do you want to see us produce? What are you interested in? How can we meet those demands? How can we provide that value on that level? So it's always really interesting. And it doesn't really take a lot of work, but it is interesting that we put more stock and faith into secondary research data than we do our own audience being able to get that data.
Yeah, it's funny when you're in a meeting and you're talking about what you're going to do at an event, and someone brings up a headline that they've read, but they haven't read the article, and they haven't done the read. They haven't, tried to be a practitioner in that. Well, I read that, so and so group doesn't respond to this or doesn't like this, and I'm like, well, I asked our audience and our people, and although that's great secondary research, this is what I'm getting from our people. And you have to take the time to do that. I think sometimes we try to find headlines that match our biases or our preconceived notions about something just to prove it can't work. And I've been in those meetings, and I know you have too, and anybody listening, we've been in those meetings where people do that. I think the best research is when you get your own people involved, because you can take that back to your leadership and that information back to your board and say, we've sent out a survey. We asked a couple of people through email. We did a couple of focus groups, and this is the information we got back. And that's the real value to your organization. I understand the importance of what all these other groups do with the secondary research, but you're 100% correct. We have to start doing that with our own people, because that's what's going to move the needle for our organization.
So shifting the conversation towards marketing technologies and looking at the future, what are some of your thoughts on how nonprofits can start leveraging technologies like AR, VR, voice first, chatbots, AI? I don't know how many other acronyms there are, but I'm sure there's a few more out there. How do you think nonprofits are leveraging this?
You just lost some people. I know you did. So it's funny because the debate of the importance of Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and all those things that you just talked about, AR, VR, AI, voice, they're already here, and groups are already starting to implement them because they're starting to see the ROI of having those technologies. I think within the next 5 years, you're going to see a pretty full integration at scale, because now cost is down so much that you can do that. Before, if you wanted to shoot a video just 5-6 years ago, it cost you several thousands of dollars. If you wanted to find a platform to deploy that video, it cost you a lot of money. Now those platforms are free. Now there's no barrier to entry. So people are starting to embrace the technology a little bit faster. But I really see in the nonprofit sector, I see VR, virtual reality, and voice being probably two that I think they're going to be implemented the fastest. I think virtual reality has an opportunity to share with people, whether it's a destination or whether it's an understanding of something, a lot better without them having to physically go or be at that destination. I think when you're looking at people that might not have the capacity to travel to see development and sustainability work done on another continent. They can see that through virtual reality. I think people have a better understanding of even something like mental illness. There's several virtual reality apps out there right now that can help simulate with somebody going through schizophrenia or depression and some of these triggers that we talk about, what they experience. They can do that through a VR experience, and that makes it real for the person. So we're talking about applications now that can make the donor experience feel like the client experience. And what greater way to experience empathy in your feeling of why you're giving to an organization than to go through that. And so the applications for this technology are endless. And I know museums are using it now. I know international aid organizations are starting to use it. But I think for the future of nonprofit organization, you have to start taking what I would call your reps in the batting cage now with things like social and digital, because once these other technologies are at scale, you're going to be in a much better place to jump in and utilize them and have a greater comfortability with it.
Like you said, the technology is already here, and I could envision people saying, well, it's not mainstream enough, the technology really isn't sophisticated enough, or maybe we don't know how to deploy it, and so on and so on. But my counter argument to that is that now is probably the best time to invest because there's not a lot of people doing it. And really, when you're online in any aspect, if you're doing something that's different or contrarian to what other people are doing, chances are you're going to get a lot more engagement as a result of that because you do stand out. And that's the whole point of it. You want to stand out. Obviously, you want to make sure that your values, your mission, and your vision of the organization are translated through that message. But still, the goal is to get that attention. And I feel like AR is an interesting one. And just to give you a little context and example from what I've seen, I watched a video about Facebook augmented reality. And it was really interesting because all you have to do is you put a piece of paper on a surface. You take your phone, and I think there's already 2 billion devices that have the AR technology already installed on the phone. You take your phone and you just almost like a QR code. It's an AR code, and then all of a sudden you've transported into this almost Blade Runner like world where there's all these screens with all this information that you can view just through the lens of your phone. And I think the one example that I saw was a passenger was walking to their gate, and they took out their device, and I think there was like a screen for Virgin Air, and it displayed a greeting to the traveler. It said, "Hi, John, your gate number is 35. It's this direction." So it's already here. There's already applications in the now that people can take advantage of. But it's just bizarre that some of that fear of it not being developed enough or mainstream enough would curtail someone from wanting to make that investment.
And that's the argument people have been using for years for all this stuff. Facebook was a fad. Well, go back even further. The internet was a fad. It was something that people were never going to actually purchase something from. In the mid 1990s, the thought for most people in this country and around the world that you were going to put your credit card number in and pay for something was completely foreign. And so that just keeps happening with each thing that emerges. Facebook wasn't going to be something that worked. Twitter didn't make sense. Who's going to communicate in 140 characters or less? And then Snapchat's not going to work. Who's going to want to do videos that disappear that you can only have for a certain amount of time? But we see these platforms, how they rise to scale and who the early adopters are, how they utilize it, and then others start to jump on and figure out different ways to utilize the technology. But that's how it always is. I'm speaking at a conference next week. I've spoken at one over the summer, and I always get that question. But what if it's just not, it's not at scale now. We don't think it's going to be successful. I go, how many times have you been wrong about that? And let's look at all those things. Who would have thought 10 years ago, renting out rooms in our house or letting other people come into our homes was going to be mainstream?
Yeah.
any sense. Or we're going to put our son or daughter in the car of a stranger and let them take them somewhere. So you have to debunk that way of thinking with look at the examples that we do today and say we can't let that deter us from jumping on something again that could provide value for our organization. Let's not let our personal thoughts about something impact what we're trying to do for our mission and for our populations that we're serving.
I feel a theme emerging here, Ian. You've got to not be fearful of putting yourself out there and just experiment and see what works.
That's the only way you're truly going to learn something. You didn't know how to ride a bike when you first saw one for the first time. When you first jumped into a swimming pool, you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't get your driver's license just because you wanted to drive. You had to practice. You had to become a practitioner. This is no different. And I think we're seeing right now, because we're looking at what's valuable to others, that if we want to get in front of people, we have to play in the space that they're in. And that's an investment of time on our own part.
Well, Ian, you make a lot of great points, and we're actually close to hitting the hour mark, if you can believe it. Do you have any final thoughts or pieces of advice that you would like to share before we close this out?
I think the one thing that I always like to end with is don't get caught up in headlines because headlines are designed to get your attention. Don't read that Facebook is only at scale for older people and the young people don't use it. Facebook's at scale for everybody. Don't just see that maybe the thing that you're starting to dive into is going to be irrelevant in 2 years, because that's somebody predicting that, and that's not somebody that actually knows what your audience wants and where they are. Become a practitioner, jump in. Don't assign it to somebody else. If you're a CEO, jump on and try it. You can jump on, follow maybe just 100 people and just start learning how that 100 people in your industry communicate to help develop what your style is until you found your voice to jump out there and start engaging yourself. Just become a practitioner and understand that the only way you're going to get attention and attraction is to provide value. And nobody wants to sit across from somebody in a restaurant and only hear them talk about themselves. It's the same thing on social. So make sure that you're figuring out a way to provide value to whoever your audience is and to express gratitude as much as possible to the people that make your organization run and allow you to do the impact you do in the community.
I love it. And Ian, where can people connect with you online?
I try to make it as easy as possible. It's Ian, I-A-N-M as in Michael, Adair. So it's at Ian M. Adair on Twitter and on Instagram. You can search me too and find me on LinkedIn. I try to post a couple times a day, trying to stay relevant to nonprofit management fundraising things. I do have a website that people can go to learn about the speaking that I do and the trainings that I offer, which is strategy27.com. Feel free to look that up. And if you're interested in learning what we do at the Grace Point Foundation and how we impact mental health in our community, it's gracepointfoundation.org.
Excellent. Well, I follow your stuff. I think it's really amazing. I try and engage as much as I can with your content because I do want to see it become successful, or more successful, I should say. Well, thank you again, Ian, for taking the time to join us and talk through your experience as being a social CEO.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jason, for following me. First of all, I appreciate that. But having me on, I've enjoyed it a lot.
Well, you certainly got my attention.
Thank you.